I can assure you that what you will observe is a vast wasteland. And to let the need to deny false arguments, free and uncorrupted communication.
On behalf of University of California, Santa Barbara, I'm just delighted to welcome all of you to the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation's 3rd Annual Frank Kelly Lecture on Humanity's Future. Thank you. I'm especially pleased and honored to welcome our distinguished speaker tonight, Dame Anita Roddick. We call her Dame Roddick because last year Queen Elizabeth II bestowed on her the distinguished title of Dame Commander of the British Empire. This title reflects the highest regard in which Anita is held around the world for her tireless efforts in the area of social justice. It is a special delight to have Anita back on our campus tonight. She was our commencement speaker in 1998, one of our most popular commencement speakers ever. She has also been a guest speaker in our classrooms frequently, and my wife Dylan was her student in the classrooms. She has inspired our students, inspired all of us with a desire to strive to what is right and good, and to confront and question actions that may not be right, may not be good. As most of you know, Anita is the founder of the hugely successful Body Shop. She dedicated the company to the pursuit of social and environmental change. This grew out of her conviction that business have the power to do good, especially public good. In less than 30 years, the Body Shop has grown to over 2,000 stores, serving over 77 million happy customers around the world. Anita is also a prolific author, a dedicated advocate for human rights and even for animal rights. And she is a clear and strong voice for social justice and responsibility. Dame Roddick will be introduced more fully by Dr. Krieger in just a moment. And I just want to say how very honored the UCSB is to host Anita's lecture tonight on kindness as a key to humanity's future. What a kind and humane topic. I would like to thank Nuclear Age Peace Foundation for sponsoring this special event. And also a thank you to all of our co-sponsors, UCSB's Interdisciplinary Humanities Center, our Global and International Studies Program, our Sociology Department, our Religious Studies Department, our Institute for Social Behavior and Economic Research Center for Global Studies, our Women's Studies Program, and UCSB's bookstore, along with PAX 2100, and the International Studies Association at Santa Barbara City College. So what an exciting collaborative effort this has been. So I now have the pleasure to introduce Dr. David Krieger, President of Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. The foundation recently celebrated 20 years of education and advocacy in support of world peace. Dr. Krieger is also an attorney, political scientist, and an author of many studies on achieving peace in the nuclear age. Since Dr. Krieger is so well known in this town, so I will have the honor and the pleasure to have him to do the introduction to Dame Roddick. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Yang. It's indeed a pleasure to be back at the university and to be having our third annual Frank K. Kelly Lecture on Humanity's Future. This lecture began with an inaugural lecture by Frank Kelly, and last year we were here at this venue to have a lecture by Professor Richard Falk on the subject of humanity's future. I'm very pleased that Frank K. Kelly, who is a founder of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation and who is approaching his 90th birthday and who has been a fount of inspiration not only at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, but in a very long and distinguished career that goes back to being a speechwriter for Harry Truman, assistant to the Senate Majority Leader of the United States Senate, and for 17 years the Vice President of the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions here in Santa Barbara, and for an even longer term, the Senior Vice President of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. So, Frank, thank you for your inspiration. Frank has always had a great vision of humanity's future. This lecture series honors that vision, and I think we're extremely fortunate to have had the speakers in the past that we've had and to have the speaker tonight that we have. I want to share with you a little bit more about our speaker tonight, a Dame Commander of the British Empire. That's very formidable. I trust, Dame Anita, that you are a commander in the battle for peace. In fact, I'm quite sure that that's the case, and I think that all Dame Commanders should fall under your command and march off to a far more peaceful, generous, and kind world. Anita wrote that she started the Body Shop in 1976 simply to create a livelihood for herself and her two daughters. And then you heard already from Chancellor Yang how this one shop that she started as a survival exercise has turned out to be more than 2,000 shops now worldwide, and to have 77 million customers in 50 different markets, 25 different languages, and so forth. I like what Anita had to say about all this, which is, and I haven't a clue as to how we got there. Something else about Anita that I think is notable is that James Dean was her idol as a schoolgirl, and that she became a social activist when reading a book about the Holocaust at the age of 10. When asked when was the most exciting time in her life, she replied, now. And she said that, I believe the older you get, the more radical you become. And she mentioned then a quote by Dorothy Sayers, which is also formidable. A woman in advancing old age is unstoppable by any earthly force. And this fits very closely with Frank Kelly's vision of the future. Anita is the author of many books, and one that I particularly think has a wonderful title and a wonderful subject is Kindness as is a Revolution in Kindness. And Anita is going to speak to that theme tonight when she talks about kindness as a key to humanity's future. So it's a great pleasure to introduce you to this Dame Commander of the British Empire, Dame Anita Roddick.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, those of you who are here, activists, citists, academics, thought leaders, and people who've got nothing better to do. So I welcome you here. I'm here today not in the guise of a successful business person, but as a renegade business leader, an activist for peace, for trade justice, and for human rights. And because I'm an educator, I know how important it is not to bore you. So, for your satisfaction, I've got a slideshow, and I will be putting on slides at the same time, and I will be putting them on, and you can look at them as you're listening to me. I believe now business is center stage. Center stage. It is faster. It is more creative. It is wealthier than governments. It is more powerful than any other social institution like politics or like religion. But if it comes with no moral sympathy or honorable code of behavior, God help us all. What we passionately need is businesses to be accountable and to base its international behavior, all the charters and treaties on sustainability and human rights, so happily signed by every darn government in the world, but so easily ignored by them. And we have to put human rights at the very, very center of every trade relationship. And we need to recognize the rights and the contributions of indigenous people who bring such vital leadership to the task of conserving the earth and its creatures in creating this new life-affirming global reality. We need to understand the indigenous wisdom, and that it constitutes one of human society's most important and irreplaceable resources. And we also need to embrace the fact that the gender balance is also essential to sustainable development. We need to accept that women's roles and needs and values and wisdom are especially central to decision-making on the fate of the earth. We need to involve women on all levels of policy making, planning, and implementation on an equal basis as men. That's what we need to do, and that's what is not happening yet. And we also need to realize how many billions of dollars are spent annually on humanitarian needs, peacekeeping operations, aid, reconciliation, reconstruction, when preventative actions cost less than 1% of most post-conflict expenses. And it also means at the same time, we have to seriously accept our responsibility to develop positive options for creating alternative, honorable livelihoods for millions and millions of workers who are employed globally in the armed conflict and weapons industries. And case after case, where commercial and human rights interests compete for attention, you can bet your bottom dollar that commerce prevails. Economic concerns are the driving forces behind arms policies and take precedence over human rights abuses, where profits are more aligned with private greed than public good. This is the stuff we should all take personally. And when I was invited to do this lecture, and I prepared for it, the sort of trick I always use is looking at the past as some sort of prologue for the future. And I realized that every one of us, shaped by the landscapes, the peoples, and the experiences we have encountered. And we remain sort of attached to them, these places, these people, by threads of stories, which then shape the geography of our minds. And every one of us carries within ourselves an inward map which has inscribed the places and the events and the people we are known to us. And when I looked back, I realized that my geography starts with Joan of Arc. She gave me enormous moral imagination. This, my first heroine, she stood up for something in a way that caught my imagination as a young child. She fought the god of conformism and apathy and always questioned herself. Learning about the Holocaust gave me absolute moral outrage and sort of kick-started me at an early age into a belief that everyone must stand up and be concerned about something and keep their mouth open. And poets like Walt Whitman gave me this language of affirmation and wonderment and awe. And listen to this, is what he said in a foreword for one of his great poems. He said, "This is what you should do." He said, "Love the earth and the sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and the crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence towards the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or any man or any number of men. Re-examine all you've been told at school and at church or in any book. Dismiss what insults your soul, and your very flesh will be a great poem." And John Steinbeck, who took journalism into the realm of social justice, a writer passionately engaged in the social currents of his time, and the photographic exhibition curated by your famous photographer Edward Steichen for the Museum of Modern Art in New York in the 50s, called The Family of Man. An amazing extensive collection of human anecdotes. And these examples, when I was younger than you, did more to teach me about the dreams and aspirations of the flaming forces of love and truth and the corrosive evil inherent in the lie. It taught me that whatever society tries to diminish, it's the family or the community that keeps pushing up like little flowers between the cracks of the pavement. And I learned at that early age that I learned that labor, community, service, the land are connective and integrative. And if you consider life, you'll probably find you're most fulfilled when you're either doing something you love, or you're in the company of someone you love, or when you somehow know or see that the higher purpose of your life and are able to even love the drudgery connected to it. And I've always held the belief that journeying provides insights, and these insights are garnered through experiences I share by telling stories. I believe that storytelling is the basis of most education, and they're the myths and the legends and the reflections of the human soul, and they remind us of our potential and the divine possibilities of our existence. And the Celts had a great expression. They said that all teachers should be poets, because knowledge, unless it went through the heart, was dangerous. And without the awareness of your emotions, you're not really able to experience reverence. Reverence is not an emotion, it's a way of being. But the path of reverence is through your heart, and only in awareness of your feelings can your heart be open. Let me explain by a story. Several years ago, I spent time in arguably the worst, most disadvantaged Native American reservation called Rosebud in North Dakota. I was invited there by the tribal colleges to see if I could come up with sort of any creative solution to one of their many and major social problem, which is no employment. So I noticed in the Badlands, I saw this sagebush growing wild everywhere. Gather the sagebush, I thought, extract the essential oil and convert it into, body stuff, shampoos, conditioners, lotions, and so on. Easy. I got the answer. And they had the plants, I had the technology. No, not easy. They said, first, what we have to do is do a sweat. And then maybe we'll discover what the plant nation wanted. So first we have to ask permission from the plant nation. Well, then maybe the plant nation will give us permission. What that experience, that ritual, the sweat lodge told me was simply this. I was not on top of nature. I was part of nature. It taught me not respect. What it taught me was reverence. Living in communities, whether they're indigenous or local, allows me an experiential education. And I'm able to humanize the issues and share what I've found and what I've been told by the grassroots communities in the majority world. Journeying provides insights. And my insight with the 30 years, or near on 30 years with a body shop, is that the catastrophe out there is poverty. And that if Western governments are to help, they have to put the poor first as active participants, as advisors and leaders. And any government that mobilizes its grassroots is at least a light at the end of the tunnel, because the only true experts on poverty are the poor. And it's poverty that drives the catastrophe when desperate people overexploit their resource base. Nothing incites people to deplete their forests, their soils, or their water supplies more than the fear that they will soon lose access to them. And when I visited the Wadabi tribe in the Sahel, they'd never heard of the word desertification, but they knew better than anybody when their soil was exhausted. They too were living out their experiences. And women on the banks of the Ganges may not know what an infant mortality rate is, but they certainly know the agony of holding a child dying of diarrhea. Forest dwellers in the heart of the Amazon may have never been told about mass extinction of species, but they know far better than any research biologist what it is to watch their primeval homelands go up in smoke before advancing waves of migrants and developers. And what that taught me was that a poor man shames us all. And when you experience the lives with the communities you care, you care. Care is another one of those four-letter words, like love, that cages power. Care is the oil that lubricates the entire mental, emotional, and physical system. So through service, through compassionate service, caring with passion, true spiritual connectiveness can be experienced. And I've found it to be one of the most regenerative, productive, and powerful frequencies for health and for well-being. And I've found that people become motivated when you guide them to the source of their power, and that anything that changes your values changes your behavior. So I'm a dogged believer in small-scale community economic initiatives which keep communities together, the culture intact. Increasingly, we are developing, many of us in businesses, these initiatives. The cynic will say, and the cynic often passes itself off having this sort of insight, say, well, viewed in isolation, these grassroots initiatives are pretty modest. 10 women planting a tree on a roadside, a dozen youths digging a well, an old man teaching neighborhood kids in a village. But from a global perspective, their scale and impact is monumental. These micro-enterprises, these organizations out there are the ragtag front line in the worldwide struggle to end poverty and environmental destruction. We need trade that respects and supports communities and families, and we need trade that safeguards the environment. We need trade that encourages countries to educate the children, to heal the sick, value the work of women, and respect human rights. We need to measure progress by human development and not by gross national product. And the people I work with are mostly under 30, mostly female, whose ethics are care, and are all in search of present-day heroes and heroines. And for them, their work is about a search for a daily meaning as well as their daily bread, for recognition as well as cash, and for astonishment rather than torpor. They see the state as defined in power, inherent in tax reviews, in barrels of oil, in miles of road. These young people define power as a power inherent in dreams, in curiosity, in music, a reach for the human spirit. They have a secret ingredient, and it's called enthusiasm. And enthusiasm created from the heart guides your whole system. So there's no resistance Everything flows. Everything seems possible. People who harbor dreams of a more responsible and compassionate world feel alone and feel unsupported, except when something occurs to bring their feelings out in the open. When they find that others have harbored these same dreams, seemingly sometimes subversive thoughts and feelings. And they believe that those who are now in control, the economic governments, the politicians, the business people, will drive us all off the edge. Global planning institutions like the World Trade Organization, like the World Bank, like the IMF, and especially are ignoring mounting evidence of impending social catastrophe that will leave widespread and dangerous inequality and insecurity. These institutions aren't working for the majority of humanity, and the roots of conflict aren't found amongst the dispossessed and the poor. They are found within our own global policies that lead them to retaliation. We don't like living in a world where there's no predictable future, I'm told. A world in which governments offer control and terror in place of the pursuit of happiness. A world in which war criminals are called leaders. I'm tired of a world where our media lie, day after day, urging masses of us, driven by fear and greed, to swallow the lies and turn on each other, seeking the enemy on whom we can vent our rage. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of a world where there's no sense of shared interest or shared belief. It seems to me there's no moral, there's no altruistic or spiritual center to our culture anymore. Everything has an economic value. Everything. We're Homo economicus. Our purpose on life is to buy, to spend, to consume. And this country's falling apart. My country's falling apart. Men are prepared to commit crimes of preemptive war, germ warfare, trying to impose law and order. They fail. They fail because the young know they have the right to power because they are numerous and because they are directly affected by what is going on. The law is suspect and disorder is built into the system. The courts are revealed as agents of control, not justice. Corporate globalization and capitalism is engaged in a never-ending social and economic warfare. Profit is now seen as a form of theft. Raw profit is seen as a form of murder. Land, water, air are polluted for profits. Police take the law into their own hands, using terror to crush the spirit of dissent and offends their own mechanical lives. They will fail. Change will never, ever, ever come about by our governments. They are economic governments. They do not measure their greatness by how they treat the weak and the frail. Change will always come about by moral dissenters and through the persistence of small committed groups of people willing to fail over long periods of time until that rare, that wonderful moment when the dam of oppression, indifference and greed finally cracks and those in power finally accept what the world's people have been saying all along, that then what has to happen now is a revolution in kindness. It will be a lifetime's work to clear away those fatuous fantasies, those false promises that have been painted on our minds layer after layer, year after year, on the millions of billboards in print and electronic ads, in a language of myth and persuasion. And if we accept what we are told is apparently inevitable, that is, the media and our political and economic leaders market the future to us, then we're merely becoming the audience of our own demise. It's time to declare that trade lacking justice, equity, decency and compassion is no longer acceptable. Economic sufficiency, perceptions and brutish power calculations no longer suffice. The bottom line has bottomed out. Words like kindness and reverence may sound sort of foreign, but it's their very qualities that are providing the quality of this new economic agenda. I've been quoted as saying as what we need now is a revolution in kindness, and I still believe it more than ever before. There is a sort of a coldness a meanness, a lack of humanism in our world now, when we speak of the dead Iraqi children as collateral damage and dismiss these passionate dissenters as terrorist sympathizers. But even without war, the world's priorities seem to have shifted out of whack. Perhaps maybe war is just a symptom of this. Everything now, as I said earlier, has an economic value. This value overrides every other human value. Kindness, compassion, humanness are all sort of now pretty conspicuous in our culture, in their absence. Power and money trump everything else, ultimately even humanity. Only in a world where power is the ultimate goal could a man like George W. Bush, who has mocked a woman on death row and can rationalize killing thousands of civilians in order to liberate them, can call themselves compassionate. Like you, I have heard that expression, practice random acts of kindness. But something about this has always sort of struck me as wrong. Kindness doesn't have to be random or squishy, squashy or new agey, feel-good bunk. In fact, it can and should be practiced tenaciously and deliberately, and it should be practiced aggressively. Kindness should not be passive. Kindness applied with focus and determination should be a revolutionary force. We need to redefine this concept of kindness, to flip it on its head. What if kindness were a prerequisite for many of the things we take for granted in the world, like our institutions? I've been quoted as saying corporations need to show more developed fear than fear and greed. And topmost among the emotions is a sense of kindness. But the need for kindness is just as desperately needed in other institutions, like our schools, our healthcare system, our legal system, our governments, our culture, and our churches. What would these institutions look like if kindness trumped profit and power, if humanity superseded bureaucracy? Matthew Fox, spiritual theologian, says provocatively, he said, "A kind religious word? Their lie is a radical idea. Can we imagine a world where Jews and Muslims are not fighting over a holy land that supposedly was left exclusively to each by a confused God who is the God of both? Can we imagine a world where Hindus and Muslims are not killing each other in India and Pakistan and Kashmir? A world where Jerry Falwell and company are not calling hell and damnation down onto homosexuals and others in the image of God? And where inquisitions and crusades were outlawed and apologies are made by popes for anti-Semitism, witch burnings, crusades and inquisitions of the past, and where the gold stolen from indigenous peoples of Americas that still adorn the churches in Rome might just be returned to the poverty-stricken owners, yes, a kind religion would be a revolution. The word kindness, after all, comes from the word kin. It's about how we treat those who are nearest to us. It's a family word. And if religion were required to be kind, it would have to find kinship with other religions, or better still, other spiritual traditions. A reconstruction of religion on the basis of fierce kindness and a real kinship would require a deconstruction as well. Are we capable of deconstructing our religious attitudes to make room for the reconstructive kindness to emerge? I would hope so. And I suspect that Jesus and Messiah and Buddha and Muhammad, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Dalai Lama would concur. In fact, is it so strange a suggestion to propose that this is what they taught in their lifetimes? Imagine a news media that refused to exploit the grief of victims for entertainment value, or a legal system not stacked against minorities where rehabilitation and generosity of spirit outweigh the impulse towards revenge. And now on to the issue of forgiveness. Imagine a world where we all resisted the impulse to lash out each other in frustration. We're in our troubled 21st century where violence and confrontation and conflict and war is rife. Forgiveness offers a means of laying aside the hatred and the blame, breaking the chains that shackle us to the past and moving on. Oh, this wonderful, marvelous F word. Forgiveness is an inspiring and it's complex and exasperating subject which provokes strong feelings in just about everyone I've spoken to. One hears of extraordinary stories of victims who've become friends with perpetrators, murderers who have turned their mind to peace building. And when you study it, you begin to see that for many people, forgiveness is not a soft option, but the ultimate revenge, a liberating route out of victimhood, a choice, a process, a final victory over those who have done you harm. As Marianne Pearl, wife of the murdered journalist Daniel Pearl, said, the only way to oppose him is by demonstrating the strength that they have taken from you. And a friend of mine here, Camilla Carr, whose boyfriend John James was held hostage in 1997 by the Chechnyan rebels, said he survived only because he'd learned from practicing martial arts that to overcome your opponent, you should meet hardness with softness. And their ordeal lasted 14 months, during which Camilla was repeatedly raped by one of her captors. But they came through it. They came through it through forgiveness. And for them, like many others, forgiveness was about seeking a way to understand the enemy. Someone else I'm in awe of is your own American-born Linda Beale, whose 26-year-old daughter Amy was beaten and stabbed to death in a black township near Cape Town. Now employs those two young men convicted of Amy's murder and later given amnesty through the Truth and Reconciliation process. Having visited the townships herself, Linda has realized we all share basic human desires. It's just the context is different. I've even asked myself, if I'd grown up in this township, could I have behaved like that? So it's a funny word, this F word. You begin to notice two very different reactions when you talk to people about it. There are those who see forgiveness as immensely ennobling and humbling response to atrocity, and those who simply just laugh it out of court. For those, the first group, forgiveness is a value strong enough to put an end to the tit-for-tat selling of scores or settling of scores, which have wreaked havoc on our generations. But for the second group, forgiveness is just a cop-out. It's a weak gesture which lets the violator off the hook and encourages only further violence. I don't know about you, but I am so much more moved by stories of forgiveness than revenge. In fact, revenge scares me a little. I don't understand the thinking which advocates the settling of scores because it creates this interminable cycle of attrition. Gentle people attract me more than resolute ones, vulnerability more than strength, and I believe there are very few truly malevolent people in the world. As Father Michael Lapsley said, all people are capable of being perpetrators or they're capable of being victims, and sometimes both. Lapsley runs the Institute for Healing Memories in Cape Town, despite or probably because he had both hands blown up in 1990 when he received a letter bombed by the F.W. de Klerk's death squads in the post. If one can understand why people behave as they do, they often then the road to forgiveness is opened. Not only is forgiveness essential for the health of society, it's virtual and vital for our personal well-being. Bitterness is like a cancer, I'm told, that enters the soul. It does more harm than those that hold it, than those whom it is held against. And yet for some rare people, forgiveness is the most constructive way forward, one which has immense rewards for victim and perpetrator, as well as society. As Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, he said, forgiveness does not mean condoning what has been done. It means taking what has happened seriously and not minimizing it, drawing out the sting of the memory that threatens to poison our entire existence. In the telling of these stories, there is the real healing. I've recently funded an exhibition called The F Word, Images of Forgiveness in the Face of Atrocity. And for me, forgiveness is as mysterious as love. I've never understood how people who experience pain through violence can see any light or any freedom from the obsession of why or how. I've never really believed that I would forgive, but then nor have I ever really understood the cage in which anger locks you into. So for me, finally, it's rhythm and beauty and heroism. in conflict, forgiveness in the face of atrocity, and kindness practiced tenaciously and deliberately, applied with focus and determination. To me, these are the curious and heart-stopping acts that I believe are worthy of the best of our life. Thank you very much.
I liked it a lot.
I'm glad you liked it. Thank you very much. Take some good. I'd be more than delighted to take a few questions. Well, as long as they're really good. Oh God, here he comes.
And we have microphones are set up on both sides, so please come up to the mics and ask your questions.
Anita, we had in Santa Barbara a few weeks ago a rather marvelous woman from South Africa whose name I cannot pronounce, and I apologize for that, to tell us about the truth and reconciliation work that went on for several years there to try to heal the divisions between white and African. And part of that process has to do with knowing the truth about what happened before forgiveness can occur. And she told some very moving stories about victims' families who only wanted to know the truth of what happened to their loved ones. And after they were told, they were more than willing to open their hearts and reconcile with the perpetrators of the violence. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this dynamic between truth and forgiveness.
It's like asking me about the meaning of life. I've understood by the people I've met who have been in conflict. I've met murderers on this occasion, and I've met the victims of the murderous crimes. And there is something extraordinary about the ability to dialogue, and it's through the dialoguing process that I've experienced that change happens. And it's only by dialoguing that I've understood how this works. And there was no time in any of the people that I spoke to as a result of this exhibition. There is no time allotted. This could go on for 6 years or 1 year or a month. And I've learned more than anything, there are traditions of forgiveness. And the African tradition is about forgiveness. It is not part of ours as yet that I'm aware of. We are much more redemptive here. But in many of the societies that I've traveled in, especially in Central Africa, forgiveness is part of their culture. And so this is what I'm learning too. I don't see a lot of forgiveness and the understanding of forgiveness in our society, in this country, definitely. One of the other things I learned by this exhibition was they don't end up having to like each other. That wasn't the point. It was freedom. There was this obsession with wanting to be free from this burden that they were carrying, which was a consistent question of why is this happening? Why did it happen, and how did it happen? And why my child, or why did this atrocity occur? And it was all a demonstration for wanting to be free. And I feel that was so justifiable. I could never understand and it's happened in my own community, why vengeance was seen as sexy. And I could never understand the response that I got when we talked about forgiveness and kindness consistently as it was seen as weak. It was never weak. It was totally the opposite of being weak. I'm sure I haven't answered your question.
I've appreciated your very eloquent writing about the problem of extreme media consolidation. How do we forgive Rupert Murdoch?
Well, that's a goodie. This is a nice audience. Number one, I think there's not enough shaming. And I think shaming is a wonderful way of doing things, without being violent. And shaming is, and we don't use the right language to him, and we don't deal enough with the media. On any social change lecture that I'm either listening to or participating in, the last thing discussed is the power of the media. On almost every organization I go to, nobody is discussing this. The power, the control, the propaganda, and nobody knows the background of who owns what. And I think until we can deconstruct that and teach in schools who owns what and the persuasion it has, I don't think we're going to get any further. We need to deconstruct our media in a sexy way, in a way that's exciting for young people, not just saying, oh, this is a stupid program, or this is... But why are they doing this? Why are they wanting celebrity and entertainment consistently without any provocative thinking going on? I mean, we haven't got, thank God, in our country yet, Fox TV. We haven't got it. We're sort of a bit free of that. Until that happens, but we've got the reality stuff, and but we do have some, thank God for the BBC, I have to say. Any protection for the BBC, just protect it from the government, protect it from Murdoch, protect it from everybody else. But I think there should be much more film festivals here. Independent film, they should be, there may be discussions on the role of the media and him. He's turgid. Hideous little turgid wimp. Horrible.
Well, since you asked for good questions about forgiveness, I thought I would share one that has bothered me greatly. I have been the witness to terrible things that have happened. So, in relation to these terrible things where one person attacks another or abuses another, I was a kind of helpless bystander. And what I find is I can't, even though I wasn't the victim, I find it very, very difficult to forgive the perpetrator. So I wonder, what path of freedom or liberation is there for bystanders burdened by the knowledge of abuse or murder or whatever has happened? Those who see it happen.
Is the clue in the word bystander? Were you a bystander?
So. I was a bystander.
I had an experience, I can't compare it to yours, I don't know what it was, but when I was working in Kosovo, and we went into a village, Chapra, which had been completely devastated in that war, and my company was going out and rebuilding a school, a conflict resolution center and a school, and one of the journeys I took in that week, I was up in the mountains with some of the farmers. And one morning, I was slept that night in this farm, and all the family, 16 members of the family, were sitting around eating beans before they went to work. And the Serbs came in, and they told me the story. The Serbs came in and with their guns said, "Don't be frightened, we're just here. What have you got for breakfast?" And the farmers said, "We have beans, a vat of beans." I said, "Well, where's the meat?" "We have no meat." They took a 4-month-old baby and cooked that child in front of the family in this vat of beans. There is no possibility of forgiveness. So our notion of setting up this conflict resolution center, we realized and the community center, we realized when we built it, when we had the stories of this, we realized there was no way at this stage, no way. So we built another school in the Serb area and hoping that there's going to be some sort of dialogue at a later date. I don't know how you deal with that. I just think for any human being, you record it into your life's experiences, and it shapes you. We're like onion skins. We're shaped by that. I don't think there can ever be a right answer or a wrong answer. It's just the horror of humanity. I hope it makes us kinder and more compassionate. I just hope it does, but just understanding loss or understanding such cruelty. And what does it do to soldiers? And I've just come back from Bangladesh working with the National Labour Committee on this issue of sweatshop labour. I've seen conditions that just, slums, dead rats, kids, all arsenic, water everywhere, and we don't give a damn. Because we're all part of the problem, which is we want cheap goods. We're happy for bloody Walmart. We're happy bunnies, so we can go in and buy this, that, and the other. We don't challenge this enough. We just got to keep fighting. I think the energy of outrage, or the energy that comes through discontentment, does accelerate energy. Somehow when you are discontented, you are more energetic. It moves you more. So I think sometimes discontentment gives you enormous energy. And there's something in the human psyche that says, I can't bear this. The condition, the sense of empathy with the human condition moves you to action. The sadness is, how can we make this more apparent for not only the young, but ourselves, middle class, the wealthy? We're a gated city next to ghettos. Those are the things I consider. I don't know. There's no answer. I'm just observing. Traveling with a vagabond, as I did a few years back, from Atlantic City down to New Orleans, and understanding my first stab of poverty in this country and the demise of the family farmer, especially the black family farmer. Seeing what happens when capital takes flight. Taking these journeys, I think, gives you real understanding of how the system works. But that's experiential. And we don't do enough of that, I think, at the moment, especially leaders or people who have got some influence don't do enough of that.
Moving back to the idea of media as playing a key role within modernizing and bringing the youth into the world today. There's what Benetton did, and what's going on today. I was familiar. I don't know how much you have to do with the Body Shop anymore, but I was very impressed at the point when you had the hemp products being used with that, and I understand that it was driven out because there was this idea that the small amount of THC was becoming a part of that. And could you go on with that?
Yeah, this was a very interesting thing, and this is about outrage again. I brought in wanted my company to promote the only vilified plant in this world, which is industrial hemp, which isn't a botanical little happy fella his cousin is. But there's no accounting for deep stupidity with a drugs enforcement agency in this country that still says you can put hemp cream on your skin and you can get high. I mean, daft. So we try to work something out, and of course then going back to the Native American reservation after I didn't work with the sage oil, but I thought get them to grow industrial hemp and build the houses on the reservations, not the tin shacks that the government provides them with, but really good houses, and get the kids into an apprenticeship scheme and make sure the limestone is mixed with hemp and make sure the boarding is hemp. And it was a jolly good experiment, and out of that came 2 wonderful houses that the Glala had built. And finally the elder said, okay, we will grow, I think, some 30 acres of industrial hemp. And it was bloody fabulous. Except last year, mid-August, the DEA and their helicopters with a new chemical flew over the reservation and burnt the 30 acres of crops with the new pesticide stuff, even though it was against the law and it was on sovereign land. So, you still have to fight the system and the stupidity on that one. But I don't know, how do you deal with it? I mean, we set up a big farm in Ontario with the Ontarian farmers who then grew industrial hemp. It was bad. All the birdseed that we were bringing in through Canada was stopped by the border, as was the fiber for the horse industry in Kentucky. Sad. And then you get Canada, which is, your really intelligent neighbour, acting a bit daft again by making sure that all the products stuck on the shelves and nobody was allowed to pick them up just in case they got high or something. There's no end to stupidity. Really no end to stupidity. But anyway, that's really not about peace. That's about stupidity, that was.
Hello. One of the most interesting sections in the Revolution in Kindness book that I found was the part where somebody was talking about the way in which somebody acting on the basis of kindness was actually encroaching upon this other person's personal dignity in some ways. And I'm just wondering, you advocate aggressive kindness. How do you think about the contradictions of aggressive kindness?
Well, I tell you what, you get my age and you become quite absolutist. I don't think there is a contradiction. I don't think so. I just believe there's so little examples of it. I mean, just so little examples of it. I'm not too worried if somebody says to me, you're encroaching on my ability to be indifferent or whatever. I remember that when I go into the prisons in Louisiana, into Angola prison, and I was talking to the two men I've been trying to get free for God knows how many years, who've been in solitary confinement for 35 years for a crime they didn't commit because they were Black Panthers. They put an educational program into this darn prison. And they were telling about how they can react to kindness in their prison, how they taught other prisoners to play chess and just acts of kindness. And to see how you can be incarcerated in Deep Cell J and still find a way to be kind has to be celebrated. To such an extent that the book is now banned in that prison as a assault to security. So I'm not answering your question in a way. I cannot be politically correct on this stuff. And I don't believe kindness does invade anybody's. Because what you're doing is not encroaching on anybody. It's a sort of life-affirming help, assistance, dialoguing. And in education, it's got to be better than what we've got now. Talking about human scale education, wonderment, awe, social justice, human rights, as that part of our education for our kids has got to be better than this conveyor belt that we're shoving our kids down, of this increasing information that gives us no humanity. And by the way, there's no jobs at the end of it either. So I'm not personally too worried about that one. Even though, and this has to be the last one, is it, right? So.
Last February, there were millions of people who came out to at least pay lip service to some of the ideas that you're advocating. And I'm wondering if that led you to do anything to try and tap into that resource.
What did they do?
The worldwide peace rallies last February.
And this is, everywhere around the world. Yeah, millions in England, Rome, Madrid. I think this was the people in any literate society has always stood up and protested to say this is not the way we want to do things, and it's a part of our cultural being. And I think the most important part of protest now, it has to be seen as creative. Dissent has to be joyful, carnival. And I think if you do it, and I think it was incredible, that sense of familiarity and common purpose, that's where the millions of people who came out to protest the war, it was just joyful. Joyful. I put an email on my website saying anybody that's lonely, who wants to come to the protest march in London, and you don't know what to do, come and meet me at the Greenpeace and Jubilee Gardens and the Greenpeace section. I had 150 old age pensioners, half of them in bloody wheelchairs, all come up from Brighton and southern England, and we got the police to push the wheelchairs, and it was joyful. So I think the public protest, I think it's the best thing that is happening. Dissent is the best thing that's happening. And I believe it's part of this new real global revolution in democracy that is everywhere around the world. It's just not being told about on our media screens. That's it. I'm going to sign something.
Thank you.